Then came along kind of the COVID, defund the police, word policing, where I think a lot of Americans were looking around and be like, that doesn't sit right with me.
A mainstream media superstar just exposed how mainstream journalism destroyed itself, and whether it's beyond fixing at this point. We're going to break down this big interview the Free Press just did with a media tycoon, plus some drama and infighting inside the White House, and a MAGA YouTuber who got brutally exposed for his hypocrisy. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, we got to talk about this really fascinating interview that Bari Weiss over at the Free Press just did with two major media tycoons, the two co-founders of a very popular and influential political news website called Axios. And in their conversation, they touched on the collapse of trust, which really, if you look at the polling, is just brutal. The sheer collapse of trust in traditional media and mainstream journalists with the broader public because of perceived bias and in-group mentality and being out of touch with where the American people are actually at. And the co-founder of Axios, who Bari interviews in this clip I'm going to play for you, weighed in with some theories about how the mainstream media and why the mainstream media imploded so spectacularly just in the last few years that I have some thoughts on. Take a listen to this first clip.
I feel like the trust really started to shatter over the last decade. And I look at it as in three phases. The first was the creation of Twitter. What happened with Twitter is people forget, like now it's a lot of conservative voices, a lot of independent voices. It was a hotbed of liberal groupthink for a long time. And it was the first time since I've been in this business that I would get on a feed and I would see reporters who I had trusted, who I had admired, making it crystal clear what their views were, what side they were on. You could tell in what they were tweeting, and you could tell in who they were following and who was following them. So I thought that was stage one, because at least before any bias people had, they hid from the public. Now it was in somewhat full view.
So I thought Jim was absolutely correct to identify Twitter as one of the main culprits behind the demise of mainstream media and its credibility. Because, guys, I've been on Twitter since 2017 in my days as a college journalist, and now Twitter is like this right-wing coded app. Elon Musk bought it and everything, but prior to that, it was a left-wing echo chamber where hyper-liberal journalists all dominated the conversation and spoke to each other and posted all their opinions about everything. And so it was totally different than the kind of old era of journalism, where maybe somebody was a military reporter for the New York Times, and you only encountered their viewpoint and their content about that subject, with which they were professional and nonpartisan and tried to appear non-biased. And then you didn't know that they were also pro-choice and hated guns and identified as non-binary or whatever stuff. But in the era of Twitter, they all just posted all their opinions about everything, all these mainstream media reporters. So of course the public suddenly looked at them side-eye, because now we know that they did root for a vast majority of them, rooted for a certain side of the political spectrum. And that became clear because of the transparency of Twitter. But it also, I think, worsened how ideological these journalists were and became, because they then began to perform for each other, right? It became this circular echo chamber of liberal journalists where they would agree with each other and bounce off each other and become more and more open and more extreme in their liberal views. So it not only revealed the problem, but I think also made it worse. But there's another element that Twitter played into as well. It created, I think, a perfect platform where these mobs, the Twitter mobs of all these journalists, could get together and brutally cancel and punish people. I've read books about what it was like at the New York Times during the 2020s and all the Black Lives Matter drama and that kind of thing. And they could brutally punish journalists who spoke out, who offered a different perspective or reported on a story that everyone else was decrying as fake news that turned out to be true. We've seen so many examples of this, whether it's the COVID lab leak theory that they smeared as racist, or a conspiracy theory that's now believed to be true, or so many other things where the media came in this groupthink and tried to shut down a certain perspective. Well, part of the reason they were able to do that for so long was because they had Twitter as a platform where they could get together as a mob and bully editors and companies to fire people who broke with with the moat. A great example of this is Jesse Singal, who hosts the Blocked and Reported podcast, of which I'm a big fan, was happy and proud to guest host an episode a while back. He did a really powerful story for The Atlantic many years ago, reporting on the truth about child transitioning, medically transitioning minors, that it's not actually substantiated by research and evidence. And he wrote a very thoughtful and nuanced piece. He was brutally attacked for it and viciously canceled by mobs of journalists that, while he was successful eventually in a more independent path, severely, I think, curtailed his hopes of succeeding in mainstream media. But that's gone. That all went away when Elon bought Twitter, and then now it has its own problems. But I think the role of Twitter in breaking mainstream media can't be understated. So Jim Vanderhei is onto something in this first bit, and I also thought he was spot on in this next bit as well. Take a listen to this second clip.
Then came along kind of the COVID, defund the police, word policing, where I think a lot of Americans were looking around and be like, that just doesn't sit right with me. And it doesn't, in the way it's being covered, didn't sit right with them.
So I already spoke about this a little bit, but he's absolutely right. COVID just destroyed the mainstream media's credibility in the eyes of much of the public because they were just dropping insane takes. They were repeating anything the government said, the experts, the Dr. Fauci's of the world, putting them on a pedestal, saying they can do no wrong, amplifying their messages no matter how contradictory and inconsistent they became. And I'll never forget some of the gems of that time. Like, and I'll put this on screen, when The Atlantic ran a headline bashing Georgia for reopening its economy and rolling back its lockdowns for, quote, their experiment in human sacrifice. Of course, Georgia ended up being fine, and there was no grand human sacrifice, and the lockdowns aged like milk. If anything, there's ample evidence they did far more harm than good at this point. But on COVID, time and time again, so many different sub-issues within the pandemic and the coverage, mainstream media just discredited itself with people because we could see all around us that things were absurd, but they would parrot them and defend them nonetheless. And that's also what happened with the Biden presidency, which I think Jim Vanderhei correctly identifies as kind of a final nail in the coffin for mainstream media, their blatant cover-up and gaslighting about Biden's obvious cognitive and mental decline. Take a listen to this third clip.
And then I think the final straw really was the coverage of Joe Biden, when people were saying, hey, I can see with my own two eyes that the guy seems pretty old, probably doesn't seem capable of being the president in the next term, and yet there's not a whole hell of a lot of coverage of it. Alex Thompson, our White House reporter, just won the White House Reporting Award because he was one of the few reporters to write about the decline of Joe Biden, and he got the hell kicked. Exactly. Some of the very reporters who may have, who will applaud him when he wins the award in a couple of weeks. If you go back and look at their Twitter feeds, there's a lot of people dunking on him and saying, that's not actually true. And we're on the other ends of the calls from the White House saying that you guys are out on a limb, you're wrong, you're crazy, blah, blah, blah.
I think this issue, more than anything, probably killed off the mainstream media's credibility with at least everyone but hardcore liberal MSNBC viewers. I'll never forget this from the Biden years. Mainstream media journalists invented a new term called cheap fakes, because you had deep fakes, which is the term that's used to refer to like fake videos or photos passed off as real, created by AI, which is a real problem. And we have to be able to differentiate. So like people might share a clip of Obama saying something crazy, but then you find out it's a deep fake. It's a fake video made by AI. Well, the mainstream media during the Biden presidency coined the term cheap fakes to label clips that were real of Biden in his clear mental decline, but somehow, in their view, misleading. In fact, they were not misleading. They were obviously true and correct and representing a real issue, as we all saw in that very painful presidential debate that got Biden to finally drop out. But the years of media coverage where they just downplayed and denied this, except for a courageous few, like that one guy at Axios, it really is disgraceful. It's the opposite of what journalism is supposed to be. And it just confirmed in the minds of a lot of the public that they do bat for a team. They're not honest brokers. And that's why we're seeing the rise of independent media and the decline of traditional mainstream institutions, whether it's the Washington Post or CNN or MSNBC. Let me play you my favorite clip. Here's MSNBC host Joe Scarborough, mid-Biden's presidency, promising us that Biden was not just fine, but the best he's ever been. Take a listen to this.
Because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it. And
that one aged like absolute milk and is just the perfect encapsulation of everything that went wrong with the media during the Biden presidency and how they lit the last vestiges of their credibility simply on fire. Now, there was one final piece in this clip of Jim Vanderhei in this interview that's going viral. There was one final piece of this clip where I do disagree with him somewhat. Take a listen to this.
And so I think those three things in totality really cemented the distrust that a lot of people have in media. And it breaks my heart. I hate that. I love journalism. I am a fierce defender of journalism. I believe that most reporters at most institutions actually do try to get to the closest approximation of the truth and achieve it most of the time. I think it's a couple of bad apples who make it look bad for everyone.
So this is where he kind of loses me. I'm also, I'm a recovering journalist. I started out working in more traditional media. I totally see the value in journalism and reporting and newspapers, and even at places like the New York Times, like CNN, like the Washington Post, there are still good reporters doing important and honest work. They just get overshadowed by all the biased, crazy people running the show. But where he loses me is when he says it's just a few bad apples. I don't think so. I think, if anything, it's about finding those gems who are not bad apples. It's about going through the barrel of apples and finding the good ones that remain, because to downplay it as just a few bad apples, I mean, not all of it's malicious. Some of it's just groupthink. When everyone in a newsroom, we talked about this with NPR the other day, they had 0 registered Republicans in their newsroom or something like that. When everyone thinks a certain way, it doesn't have to be a conspiracy. They don't have to get together and say, how can we smear Republicans today? That's not even how it has to work. There's just blind spots. There's just ways where they're all in an echo chamber and they all see the world a certain way that results in very partisan, very ideological, and very unfair coverage. It's inevitable. You see the same kind of thing in really far right news websites where everyone is also of a certain perspective. It's just how human nature works. But to dismiss it as just a few bad apples is, I think, not really correct or fair. And the other piece of this is that I've been a longtime reader of Axios. I do find a lot of its coverage valuable. But Jim Vanderhei and the other co-founder in this interview probably need to take a little more accountability that Axios has been part of the problem. I've read so many blatantly biased headlines from them over the years. They've had a whole host of stories I'd categorize as unfair or slanted. Maybe they're better than most, but it is great that he has all this insight about the breaking of mainstream media, and maybe they've course corrected at Axios to some extent recently, but a little bit more accountability in this interview, and I did listen to the full thing, would have been appreciated. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with his theory on how mainstream media was broken? And more importantly, do you think it's beyond repair? That's where I'm leaning these days, that I think independent media and YouTubers and podcasts and this kind of thing will ultimately eclipse and replace a lot of the mainstream media. At least that's what I'm hoping. It would certainly be better for me personally in my career. But let me know what you think in the comments. I do love to read the comments. I always love hearing what you guys have to say. And please do consider subscribing and hitting that like button while you're at it. Oh, and guys, thank you all to the dozens and dozens of people who've already sent in voice messages. I will put the link in today's show notes. I'm still collecting. Send me your voice message. Leave just your first name. Tell me something about your life. Ask me a question. Ask me for advice. I'm going to do a roundup for a bonus episode real soon, reacting to and answering some of the best and most interesting ones I receive. But even if I don't choose yours, I really do appreciate all of you guys taking the time to reach out. Okay, up next, the girls are fighting in the White House. Okay, the cat fights are breaking out. And this time it's between the trade advisor, Peter Navarro, who is advising Trump with his current trade war and all these kind of tariff policies that they've been rolling out, and Elon Musk, the head of Doge, who is a top advisor to the president, but sees the issue of trade very differently than Peter Navarro, who is a hardcore anti-trade person, whereas Elon, at his core at least, wants to see more free trade. So take a listen to this coverage from News Nation, summing up the beef between these two that's frankly getting catty and all happening out in the public eye. Take a listen to this coverage from Leland Verte over at News Nation.
Washington here at times resembles the middle school playground. The values are about the same. As to say, being popular in Washington almost objectively does not make you a good person. Trump's senior counselor, Peter Navarro, and Elon Musk's public clash over tariffs resembles two bullies vying for attention from the class's prettiest girl. Musk's stream of insults, including calling Navarro Peter Retardo on social media, are not the united front the White House needs right now. In fact, it's the opposite of what they need. Musk also wrote, Navarro is truly a moron. What he says is demonstrably false. And Tesla has the most American-made cars. Navarro is dumber than a sack of bricks. Musk then went on to apologize to bricks. These posts come in reaction to Navarro's interview on CNBC yesterday.
We all understand in the White House, and the American people understand, that Elon's a car manufacturer. But he's not a car manufacturer. He's a car assembler in many cases. If you go to his Texas plant, a good part of the engines that he gets, which in the EV case is the batteries, come from Japan and come from China. We want the tires made in Akron.
The Navarro versus Musk debate might as well be Navarro against President Trump's entire cabinet and most Republican members of Congress. Playing kindergarten teacher today was White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
These are obviously two individuals who have very different views on trade and on tariffs. Boys will be boys, and we will let their public sparring continue. And you guys should all be very grateful that we have the most transparent administration in history.
So the tea is piping hot. I mean, they are just going at it in public with each other, bashing each other. And whoever you agree with, however you feel about this issue, I will say that's not a great look for any White House to have such important, influential people fighting publicly. Like, it is good to have a diversity of views in your White House and your team and your cabinet, but those arguments are supposed to happen behind closed doors. And while it's slightly funny, Musk calling him Peter Retardo or saying he's dumb as bricks and then apologizing to the bricks, that one did make me laugh. I'm not going to lie. I don't like that, though, in general, that kind of insults, the name calling. I try to avoid that. But I will say, I think Elon is correct on the merits here. I think Peter Navarro is totally wrong, saying totally incoherent things that every other economist in the world disagrees with, which is why, guys, he had to make up a fake economist that he's repeatedly cited in his work over the years, who doesn't exist. I'll prove that to you and show that to you in a minute, guys. But first, here's a clip of Peter Navarro and the advice that he's giving the Trump administration when it comes to trade.
But my point here is this: they're coming now and saying, we want to talk, we'll lower our tariffs to zero if you'll lower your tariffs. That's not the problem. Vietnam is a great example, Laura. They sell us $15 for every one we sell them. Zero tariffs would get us no reduction in the $123 billion deficit we have. And five of that $15 they sell us, you know what? It's China. It's that clip you showed about Cambodia, how China just comes over.
Thing, right?
It's the same kind of, we call it transshipping. It's just...
So at least in the Peter Navarro wing of Trump's cabinet, it's not about reducing tariffs. It's not about like using reciprocal tariffs to negotiate with other countries and get lower tariffs overall for everyone. I have some issues with that approach, but at least I think in theory, it makes sense. We can have that conversation. Peter Navarro just thinks trade is bad. He just thinks it's inherently a problem that Vietnam sells us things we need and use and want, and we give them money for it. And because they're a much poorer country, I think they have an income per person about $5,000, they don't buy that much from us in return. So we have a trade deficit, which is also a goods surplus, where it just means we get more stuff and they get money. I have a trade deficit with my grocery store because I've bought stuff I need from them for years and they've never bought anything from me. But I'm not being harmed or ripped off. It's just a mutually beneficial exchange. So trade deficits are not bad. In fact, as the Tax Foundation, and I'll put this up on the screen, has explained, the money that we give out in trade deficits that leaves the US and goes out into the world, a lot of it actually gets reinvested back in the US because the dollar is the global reserve currency. So because of this unique status, it's really fine and actually not harmful for the US to just run trade deficits into perpetuity. It comes back as foreign investment, a lot of it, and we've been running trade deficits for decades, both in times of a strong economy and times where we have a weak economy. It's simply not actually a bad or harmful thing. So I'm Team Elon on this one. I think he's absolutely on the right side of this debate, especially because of the random shade Peter Navarro's been throwing at Tesla, which is an American company that makes its cars in America mostly. It's just nothing he's saying about it is true or correct. I'm Team Elon on this one. Trump needs to fire Peter Navarro, get him out of the White House. He doesn't understand what he's talking about, and listen to Elon when it comes to economics, okay? Peter Navarro, and we're going to go over this, again, like I mentioned, made up a fake economist that he repeatedly cites in his books and his papers and his work because no actual economists, serious economists, agree with him. So when he was writing a book, he made up a fake one that he could repeatedly quote and cite. Seriously, guys. And this is not new. This isn't some gotcha people are pulling up now to discredit him. This was reported on years ago. Take a listen to this reporting from like half a decade ago from CNBC.
But the resident White House hawk, Peter Navarro, is leaning on his fictional alter ego, which he calls Ron Vera, to disseminate a case that tariffs are good and a phase one deal is bad. In an email memo circulated on Monday, December 9th, obtained by CNBC and first reported by the New York Times, Ron Vera makes this contrarian argument that, quote, tariffs are working to defend economy and have had no negative impacts on growth or stock market rise. They spur growth by improving net exports. And he also suggests the White House, quote, get uncertainty out of the market by announcing no deal until after the election and ride the tariffs to victory. It's unclear why Navarro wanted these talking points out there, especially under the stage name of Ron Vera, and how widely he circulated this memo, the authenticity of which he confirmed to the New York Times. We reached out to Navarro and the White House for comment. Navarro himself has been arguing upstream against this phase one deal since it was announced, Brian, but certainly now he's taking his case over email and sending out these arguments as his alter ego, Ron Vera, instead.
Some sort of jumbled up anagram of his last name, obviously. I mean,
Right.
Does he have another one? Is there like a third one, Kayla, that you know of?
So far as we know, Ron Vera is the one that he leans on the most. He came under fire for this back in October when an Australian scholar realized that this character, Ron Vera, was appearing in many of Navarro's books and that he couldn't find this expert cited elsewhere. Navarro said it was an open secret, that it was essentially an inside joke that had spilled out into the open. But even after coming under fire for that and criticizing journalists for using their own anonymous sources, why Navarro chose to lean on this identity again to disseminate this case is really perplexing.
So on one hand, you have the genius entrepreneur, and on the other hand, you have the economist who doesn't understand basic economics and made up fake people to cite in his research and his books. Gee, I wonder who Trump should listen to. To me, it's pretty clear that with this drama going on between the two of them, it needs to be shut down. No more public name calling, but Trump should listen to the Elon approach, not the far-fetched fringe ideology and innumeracy of Peter Navarro. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Okay, up next, we got to take a look at this clip from the YouTuber CoffeeZilla, because he just called out Benny Johnson, and this mega YouTuber just got absolutely exposed. Take a listen to this clip where he shows how Benny Johnson says one, frankly, in my view, pretty ridiculous thing about the current stock market plummet under Trump with all the tariffs, but said something very different when it was Kamala Harris. Take a listen to this.
Losing money costs you nothing.
There it is.
This is just the reality of life. Like, were you young and dumb? How much money did you lose? Everyone loses money. Everyone loses money. It costs you nothing. In fact, it builds quite a bit of character.
What an amazing way to look at this. You know, don't worry about losing money. It's actually building your character, and it doesn't cost you anything, except for the money part. I guess it does cost that. Now, I was so taken aback by I've never seen anybody try something like this. So I thought, well, at least he's ideologically consistent. He probably says this every time the stock market crashes, right? Like when it crashed under Biden or Harris, that he said the same thing, right?
It's bloody Black Monday. Holy moly. The Kamala crash is here.
Kamala needs to get in front of a camera today. People are losing their homes today. People are losing their fortunes today. People are losing their futures today. People are losing their 401ks today. This is shaping up to be one of the worst market days
in American history.
Whoa! So I guess when the other side, they lose you money, it's terrible. People need to speak up now. When it's your guy that you shill for, all of a sudden it's, hey, this builds character. Have you really even lost money when you lost money?
So just first and foremost, what Benny was even saying was ridiculous. Losing money costs you nothing. Yeah, easy for you to say, bro. You're a multimillionaire podcaster who at one point was getting paid like $300,000 a month by the Russians, which, to be clear, I know he didn't know it was the Russians. I'm not even blaming him for that. I'm just saying you made so much money. Please don't tell other people, including people who are on like retirement plans and pensions, that the stock market plummeting is fine because losing money builds character. Out of touch, beyond belief. And like CoffeeZilla pointed out here, insanely inconsistent and hypocritical. Look, if you want to support tariffs, if you want to say the stock market doesn't matter, I disagree with you on both fronts, but we can have that debate if you're actually holding those positions. But that's not what people like Benny Johnson are doing. They're just flip-flopping. They're doing total 180s based on the party affiliation of the person in charge because they're just pandering. That's the difference between somebody who, like myself, I have an ideology, I have a perspective, I have a viewpoint, but I'm not just doing propaganda for one side, for Team Red or Team MAGA. Benny Johnson is. Like, how can you look at that clip and say anything else? Because a significantly less severe stock plummet under Biden-Harris, he was freaking out and telling people that their lives are being ruined and Kamala must stop this immediately. But when it's happening under Trump, he's saying, actually, it's fine. Losing money builds character. Seriously? I mean, also, you're recorded, right? Like, you're getting up on camera, fixing your mouth, and saying stuff to be reviewed into perpetuity by anybody who goes on YouTube. So don't you know that you said something different, like, not that long ago? Wouldn't you be concerned that people are going to clip you up and make you look like a total hypocrite and a fraud? If I knew I had said something directly contradictory on this show just like 6 months ago, and I was going to make a whole episode where I was saying something different, I probably wouldn't do that. Or I would address it and explain why it's different or why I changed my mind. I wouldn't just do a 180, then act like nothing ever happened. But that's because I'm an independent political commentator, not a mascot for either side. But what do you guys think? Are you still going to trust Benny Johnson's coverage and takes after this? Or has he kind of lost your trust by doing this 180? Do let me know in the comments. And please do, if you haven't yet, if you made it to this point in today's show, clearly you found something of value. Please do consider subscribing and sticking around, and do hit that like button if you haven't yet.